The alarm cut through the ship before I even opened my eyes. Red light. No warning shot. No countdown. Just noise, sharp and endless, telling every soul aboard that something had already gone wrong. I am Nora Whitfield, human liaison to the Coalition fleet, and the moment I stepped into the corridor, I knew this was not a drill. Officers of 3 different species ran past me, their translators stuttering with panic. I grabbed the nearest one, a tall Velcar named Doran, his skin pale blue with worry. "What is it?" I asked. "Unknown hostiles. They came from nowhere, shields failing on deck 6. I did not wait for permission. I ran toward the command deck, boots hitting metal floor in a steady rhythm, heart pounding but mind clear. This was not new to me. Chaos had a shape once you learned to read it. When I reached the bridge, Commander Alric Venn stood frozen, staring at a screen full of red dots multiplying faster than his crew could track them. He was the same commander who, only 2 days ago, had laughed when I spoke about human history. Exaggeration, he had said. No species could face what you claim your ancestors faced and still stand today. Wars that killed millions, diseases that swept continents, and yet you say you rebuilt every time. Impossible. Storytelling, nothing more. I had smiled then and said nothing, because words meant nothing to someone convinced you were lying. But now, watching him grip the edge of his console, I understood this was no longer about proving anything. It was about surviving. "Commander," I said, stepping beside him, "your shields will not hold with pattern defense. Their ships adapt to it." "We follow protocol," he snapped, not looking at me. "Protocol has kept this fleet alive for 2 centuries. Then, protocol is about to end this fleet in 20 minutes. He turned to me, eyes narrow, but before he could argue, the ship shuddered violently. Sparks rained from a ceiling panel. Screens flickered. Somewhere below us, someone screamed a warning about Deck 6 losing pressure. "They are not attacking randomly," I said, watching the pattern of red dots. "They are studying you, learning your formation. The moment they finish learning, they will break through everywhere at once." "And you know this how?" Doran asked, breathless beside me. "Because that is what desperate, hungry things do. I have read about it. I have seen it in stories passed down for generations. Enemies that do not fight fair, that do not stop, that force you to become something you never wanted to be, just to survive." Venn stared at me for a long moment, jaw tight. Then, finally, something in his eyes shifted. Not trust, not yet. Just the terrifying calculation of a man realizing he had no better option. "What do you suggest?" "Break formation," I said. "Scatter the smaller ships. Let them chase shadows instead of hunting a single pattern. Concentrate firepower only where they commit fully, and put me in charge of the defense line on Deck 6. That is against every regulation we have." "So is dying," I said. Silence. Then he nodded, once, sharp and final. "Do it." I moved fast, gathering anyone willing to follow, human and alien alike. A young engineer named Callum Ashworth fell in step beside me, his hands trembling slightly, as he checked a weapon that looked older than he was. "You really think this will work?" he asked. "I think doing nothing guarantees failure. Doing something at least gives us a chance." We reached Deck 6 to find chaos. Smoke curled along the ceiling. A support beam had collapsed, blocking one corridor entirely. Crew members from at least 4 species huddled near the far wall, uncertain, waiting for orders that made sense. I climbed onto a crate so they could see me. "Listen to me. I know none of you trained for this. I know this is not what any of you signed up for. But right now, none of that matters. What matters is the next 10 minutes. A Velcar soldier named Ilsa Marrow stepped forward, arms crossed. "And what makes you qualified to lead us? You are not even fleet-born." "Because my people have faced this exact kind of fear before," I said. "Not with better weapons, not with more numbers. We faced it with will. with refusing to give up even when giving up made more sense on paper. That is not exaggeration. That is survival. She studied me, unconvinced but silent. I took that as enough. Here is what we do, I continued. We do not hold one line. We create 3 smaller ones, each covering the others. If one falls back, the next one is already waiting. No one fights alone. No one gets left behind. We move as a single breathing thing, not scattered pieces. Callum began organizing crates into makeshift barriers. Others followed, hesitant at first, then faster as urgency replaced fear. I watched species who had never worked together suddenly moving in rhythm, driven by the simple, ancient instinct to survive. The first wave of hostiles broke through the damaged corridor minutes later. I will not pretend it was easy. It was loud, fast, and terrifying, every second stretched thin with tension. But we held, not because we were strongest, because we adapted faster than they expected. When their first assault failed, they regrouped, exactly as I predicted. I turned to Ilsa. Second position, now. Do not wait for them to reach us. She hesitated only a moment before shouting orders in her own language, and the second line formed exactly where I hoped it would. Above us, the ship groaned under pressure, but Ven's scattered formation was working too. Reports came through static-filled comms, ships weaving unpredictably, forcing the enemy to spend precious time recalculating instead of striking cleanly. They cannot find a pattern, Doran's voice crackled through the comm, disbelief clear even through translation. It is chaos, but it is working. It is not chaos, I said, catching my breath during a brief lull. It is controlled unpredictability. There is a difference. Callum glanced at me, sweat and determination on his young face. Where did you learn this? From every account passed down from moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. My ancestors were not stronger than everyone around them. They simply refused to stop when refusing was the only advantage they had left. The enemy pushed a second time, harder, angrier, as if frustrated by our refusal to break. I felt the strain in every muscle, the weight of responsibility pressing down harder with every passing second. But when I looked around, I saw something I had not expected. Fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer paralyzing. It had become focus. Ilsa fought beside me now, without hesitation, without questioning my orders. Somewhere in the middle of survival, doubt had quietly disappeared. Third line, fall back to reinforce, I called, voice hoarse but steady. The maneuver worked exactly as planned. The enemy, expecting collapse, instead met resistance stacked deeper than before. Their advance stalled, faltered, and finally broke apart entirely as their coordination crumbled under the pressure of an enemy that simply would not stop adapting. Minutes later, Ven's voice came through the ship-wide comm, tight with controlled relief. Hostile forces retreating. Scattering formation worked. Deck 6, status report. I keyed my comm, chest heaving. Deck 6, holding. No losses. Repeat, no losses. For a moment, silence filled the corridor, broken only by heavy breathing and quiet disbelief. Then Callum laughed, half from exhaustion, half from something closer to joy. Later, once the ship stabilized and repairs began, I found myself back on the bridge. Ven stood staring out at the stars, quieter than before, something in his posture different now. You saved this fleet, he said without turning. We saved this fleet, I corrected. All of us. He finally turned to face me, and for the first time since I had met him, there was no mockery in his expression. I called your history exaggeration. I called it storytelling, meant to impress, not inform. I remember, I said simply. I was wrong. I said nothing, letting the silence hold its own weight. Your people did not survive by luck, he continued. You survived by refusing collapse when collapse seemed guaranteed. That is not exaggeration. That is something else entirely. We call it endurance, I said quietly. It is not glamorous. It is not clean. Most of the time, it simply looks like refusing to stop. He nodded slowly, something like respect settling into his features. Behind him, through the viewport, the stars stretched endless and silent, indifferent to everything that had just happened. Later, alone in my quarters, I allowed myself a long breath, the kind that comes only after danger has finally passed. My hands still trembled slightly, adrenaline slow to fade. I thought about Ven's words, about disbelief turning slowly into understanding. We had not proven ourselves through strength alone. We had proven it through something far simpler and far harder to fake. The will to keep going when stopping would have been so much easier. The coalition would remember this day differently now, not as a story exaggerated for effect, but as a lesson written in real time, under real pressure, with real consequences. I closed my eyes, letting exhaustion finally take hold, comforted by one quiet truth settling into my mind. They had once said humans exaggerate. Today, Earth had answered, not with words, but with something no one in that fleet would ever forget.